Hello and welcome back to this coding challenge. Now you have to write a Python program that reverses a string. This is a very common exercise when you're starting to work with Python, and it is very helpful to solve other types of problems. So let's see how you can do that. I have 3 different options for you, and they all use different tools of the language. So let's start diving into each one of them. Right here, for our first option, we are using something called string slicing. We are going to get a copy of the string that we are assigning to the variable s. The string currently has the value hello. That is the string that we want to reverse right now. We assign it to the variable s. And after that, we are going to use a particular syntax that we have right here. Let me explain this with a comment right here so we can see what is happening behind the scenes. When we index a string, for example, let's say that right here I have a variable that references a string. We use square brackets, and we have 3 values that we can specify: start, stop, and step. These 3 values have specific default values, so we can get a slice of the string, a portion of the string that starts from a specific index, stops at a specific index without including it, and jumps from one character to the next or from one index to the next in a particular way. That is what the step parameter represents. So what are we doing right here? Well, when we omit these values, like right here, we add 2 colons before the step parameter. That is what we have right here. We are saying that we want to use the default value for start and the default value for stop. And we just want to customize the value of the step. How are we going to do that? Well, we are going to start from the very end of the string in this case, since we are using a step of -1. -1 serves as a way to reverse the string, to print the slice in reverse order, from the last character to the first character. Since we are omitting these 2 parameters, we are specifying that we want to include all the characters in the string. We don't want to start or stop from any specific indices. We just want to get the entire string in reverse order. That is why we specify -1 right here. So what will this return? It will return the string in reverse order. First, it will include the character O, then the characters L, L, then E, and finally H. The casing will be preserved. We are not changing the characters at all. We are just getting the same string in reverse order because we specified a step of -1. Let's save the file and run our code. And that is exactly what we see as the output. Hello, printed in reverse. So we know how to reverse a string now with string slicing. Let's test this with different test cases. For example, let's write the string Python. And if we run the code, we see Python printed in reverse order. You can confirm that this is the reversed version of the string. Let's also test this with a shorter string, like for example, WO. We have only 2 characters and we see that they are reversed correctly. And what happens if we have an empty string? The program should also handle that case. So if we save the file and run the code, we just see a blank output because we are printing the empty string. The program works as we expected. Awesome. Now you know how to implement this with string slicing. But there are other alternatives to reverse a string. Usually and commonly, you will see this one right here in Python. But we have other options, so let's comment out the code and uncomment the second option, right here. In this particular option, we are also defining the variable s, and we assign a particular string to that variable. You can see that this is just a small variation from option 1. We are still using string slicing right here, but instead of using this directly in the print statement, we are assigning it to a variable. This is just to show you that when you are working with strings in Python and you generate a slice, you can assign that new string, that new slice, to a variable and use that variable in your program. For example, right here we are using the variable in the print statement. Let's save the file and run the code. And we see exactly that, the string reversed. We're doing exactly the same thing, just adding a variable. Let's comment out this code, and now let's go to our third option, which is a little bit more elaborate. And perhaps this is not what you will usually see in Python when we reverse a string, but it works exactly the same. So let's see how we can use these tools that you can see right here. Of course, we have to define the variable s with the string that we are going to reverse. And after we have the string, we are going to use a combination of functions and methods that are going to return the reversed version of the word or of the string. First, we find this function right here. This is a built-in function, reversed, that returns the sequence that we pass as argument, and it returns it as a list. So for example, when we call reversed of hello, we are going to get a list with the characters in reverse order. O, L, L, E, and H. That is the value that will be returned by the function. And after we have that value, what are we going to do? Well, we are going to join, that is why we are calling the join method. We're going to join all the elements in this list with an empty string. We're not going to separate the elements, so instead of writing a space right here, we are writing an empty string. This is the character that we want to use to join those elements of the list. We are passing the list as the argument to the join method. That is why we have this function call within this pair of parentheses for the join method. We get that list, and after that, we are going to call join like this. But this function call will be replaced by the list, okay? This is what is happening behind the scenes. We're going to call the function, and the value returned will be this. So this will be passed as the argument, and then we are going to join those elements with an empty string. And what are we going to do with that? Well, we are just going to get the string reversed. This will be the final result of calling join and reversed like this. Since the value will be returned, we can assign it to a variable. We are calling it reversed word in this case, and then we are using that variable in the print statement, so we can print it as the output. Awesome, so let's delete these comments, save the file, and run our code. And we see the string reversed, which is exactly what we needed. Let's test this with a string Python. We also see Python reversed. And if we have a string with only 2 characters, we also see the correct output. This code also works if we have an empty string. We don't see any outputs because the string was empty. Awesome! So now you know how to reverse a string using 3 different options: string slicing, assigning the result of string slicing to a variable, and using a combination of reversed and join. Typically, you will use and see string slicing being used in Python to reverse a string, because it is more concise and we immediately recognize it in our code when we see -1 as a step. Great work so far! When you're ready, let's start working on the next coding challenge.